Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Om Akyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Nina Tasmai Shri Gurube Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Ina Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Madeka Bando Matsangin Maguro Manmahadana Manistaraka Madbhagya Madananda Namostute. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 16. Narada Muni is preaching to Chitraketu through the voice of or at least it appears to be through the voice of the dead son. And yesterday, this Jiva, or Narada, and the voice of the Jiva, established that the relationships in this world are ultimately not true. The relationships are due to the sense of mindness, mamatvam. And when that sense of mindness is lost, so the sense of the relationship is also lost. And since the I-mind concept is always shifting from body to body, and even within one body, it moves around, it's not fixed. So therefore, the sense of sambandha is not fixed in the material world. We concluded by saying that this is ultimately the plight of the conditioned soul. As an infinitesimal jiva, in one sense, you can say that the existential melees or crises of the jivas is that they don't have a permanent I-mind concept. And so they're constantly let down by the environment and also ultimately betrayed by their own sense of identity, which keeps moving around. And so the souls are reaching for a permanent concept of I and mind, which is only possible in relationship to the divinity, Bhagavan. So that was kind of what was spoken. And now there are a few verses left here that's spoken by the Jiva, and apparently starting with verse 9. We went up to verse 8. And here, starting with verse 9, apparently the verses are shifting to a discussion about Bhagavan. Because a lot of the qualities of the Jiva and Bhagavan, not a lot, some of the qualities of the Jiva and Bhagavan are similar. But there are some distinctions to be made as well. And so Narada, in the voice of the Jiva, wants to point out the distinctions between the Jiva and Paramatma, or the Supreme Lord. So in a few verses, he offers us that distinction also. So this is starting with verse number 9. Esha nityo vyaya shukshman, esha sarva shreya swadrik, atma maya gunair vishram, atmanam srijate prabhu. The living entity is eternal and imperishable because he actually has no beginning and no end. He never takes birth or dies. He is the basic principle of all types of bodies, yet he does not belong to the bodily category. The living being is so sublime that he is equal in quality to the Supreme Lord. Nonetheless, because he is extremely small, he is prone to be illusioned by the external energy, and thus he creates various bodies for himself according to his different desires. So the first two lines can apply to the Lord or to the Jiva. The word here is Esha. So Esha means this living entity is how it's translated. So the living entity can refer to the Jiva, or the living entity can refer to God, who is also a living entity, like in a literal sense. So who is it referring to is hard to say. Prabhupada has taken a blend of both, and Sri Vishnu's commentary says it refers to Bhagavan. So their characteristics are pointed out straightforwardly. Nitya means eternal. So eternal means not having a beginning or end. That is the technical definition of eternal. Unlike some things which have no beginnings, but can have ends, like the ignorance of the Jiva, or things that have beginnings without any end, like the subsequent knowledge of the jiva after being in ignorance. So these are called prag abhava and pratamsa abhava. Something that has no beginning but has an end, or has beginning without end. But eternal means having no beginning or having no end. So that refers to, of course, the Supreme Lord primarily, and his Shaktis, which are also of the same nature, including the Jiva Shakti and also true of the Maya Shakti. Avyaya means imperishable. So that which is having beginning or end is imperishable, because if it doesn't come into being, it cannot go out of being. So it is called as avyaya, which means imperishable. Sukshma. So sukshma generally means like subtle. And reference to the jiva, it means because of its very small nature, being anu, smaller than even the material atom, he's called a shukshma. Or the word shukshma, subtle, can mean beyond the, how you say, adokshaja, beyond the ability for the senses to grab. Like in the verse, Atashi Krishna Namadi Nababet Graham Indriya, the senses aren't able to grab the holy name, and etc. of Krishna, because it's in an ontologically superior category, so the senses can't grab it or ascertain it by their own inherent intrinsic powers. So for that reason, the soul or God is referred to as sukshma. There's a nice verse, God, I haven't quoted in a long time. From 11th Canto, chapter 14. It must be verse 25 or 26. How does that verse start? Yeah. Oh my God, I can't think of it. Sorry, now it's my mind. I have to share it. Let's look it up. No one knows this verse, 11, 14, 25, 20. It's like kind of a popular verse. I'm quoting it because of this Shukshma line. God, rusty. Yeah, this one. This 26. Yeah, Yataya Tatma. So Yataya Tatma Pramigate so Ma Punya Ghata Shavana Bidhanai. Tata Tata Pashati Vastu Shukshman Chakshoyata Vanjana Sampayuktam. So Yatayata, to the degree that the Atman is purified by the sadhana, by the sadhana of hearing and singing the stories, my pious stories. This is Krishna speaking to Uddhava. Tata, to that degree, Pashati, he can see the Vastu, which is Shukshman. So the Vastu is Shukshman, like Krishna, like the Bhagavatam opens up with the phrase, Vedyam Vastavam Atra Vastu Shivadam Tapatare Omulanam. That in this Bhagavatam, the Vastava Vastu, Krishna, will be known. How will he be known? Well, he'll be known through bhakti. So tata tata pashati vastu shukshma. You'll be able to see that vastu, which is sukshma. That means beyond the material senses. Sri Vaishnava's commentary says that this vastu shukshma also is a reference to the siddhadeha, which is, of course, also beyond the material senses. So one will be able to see it, just as an eye that's diseased when given a certain ointment may recover its ability to see. So also we'll be able to see the transcendence, which is Shukshma. Okay, anyway, great verse from the Bhagavatam, I had to share it. So Aisha, this living entity, is Sarvashraya Swadrik. So Sarva Ashraya means the shelter of all sorts of forms. So it can refer to the jiva who can exist in any type of psychophysical apparatus. But all these psychophysical apparatus, they cannot exist without consciousness. So the individual jiva in this sense can be called as Sarva Ashraya, or God is himself the shelter of all being. He's the ground out of which, all being emerges, the ground upon which all being rests, and the ground into which all being returns in the end. So in this sense, God is actually Sarva Ashraya. Swadrik is self-effulgent, meaning that a self-effulgent, an example of a self-effulgent vastu is the sun. It doesn't require something outside of itself in order to illuminate. It has its own intrinsic illuminating capacity. So it's called self-effulgent. But the jiva is like this, because nothing in the material world can illuminate the jiva. So he is self-effulgent, Swadrik. He's illumined by his own power, which is minute. But ultimately, that power of illumination is rooted in the Paramatma. That's why the meaning of the word Atma primarily refers to Paramatma. And only in a secondary sense does it refer to the individual jiva. Because the jivas are like the sunshine, and the Paramatma is like the sun, what do you call it, globe, disc? We'll say disc, that's how Bhagavatam use it. So when you say sun, like you say, oh, the sun is hot, we're generally referring to the sunshine, but the word sun primarily refers to the sun disk. So when we say Atma, many times we think of the individual jiva, but actually it primarily refers to Paramatma. And that is why he's called the self of the cells, or he's the self with a capital S sometimes. In translation work, the capital S is used to describe this. So that Paramatma is self-effulgent. Nothing can illumine him. It is he who illumines all of existence, including consciousness of the individual jiva. Atmamaya gunair vishram atmanam srijate Prabhu. So the master, the Prabhu, so this is a reference to God directly. He srijate, or appears or creates himself. How? In the form of the universe composed of the material gunas. Atmamaya gunair vishram. So this is one way of taking this line. The God appears or creates himself as the universe in the form of the gunas of material nature. The material nature is equated to God. It also has identity with God because it comes from God. So anything that comes from God is also God, but in a lesser sense. There's an interesting word I come across in my reading called holarchy. So silly, sounds like a silly word, but holarchy basically means a hierarchy of wholes. Wholes means W-H-O-L-E-S, not H-O-L-E-S. Having this conversation with somebody before, they thought I was saying like a hole in the ground. No, like completion, holes, or to be complete. So a whole then refers to a whole, and a holarchy refers to a hierarchy of wholeness or wholes that are comprised of parts that are themselves whole on a lower level of being, So for example, the body is a whole, but it's composed of atoms, which are wholes on a smaller level of being, so to speak. Or the earth is a whole, and it's comprised of entities that live within it that are themselves wholes on a lower level of being. Or even language. A language, is comprised of, like, you can say sentences, and sentences are comprised of words. Words are comprised of syllables. Syllables are comprised of, how do you say that word? Like phonemes? Phenom. I don't even know how to say that word. Anyway, so everything in life is you can be expressed in these sort of holarchies. So the Prabhu, God, is the major whole in which everything is existing. So if everything is existing with him, it is existing with him I don't know how to say that word. I know how to spell, I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, sometimes you can take the ghetto person out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of him, sort of thing. Anyway, so all of nature mimics God in this sense. It's a whole comprised of parts of themselves, wholes on a lower level. So God is that first whole category. So anything that is not Krishna, that's how we Gaudiya Vaishnavas view the greatest whole, so to speak, the greatest complete person, out of which other complete persons come, such as the various forms of Bhagavan, out of which other complete persons come, such as the jivas who come from Paramatma. So anything less than Krishna is also God, but on a lower level of being, so to speak. It's God, but not in his full presence. So this is also true of nature. It is true of nature. I've been working with the peanut oils and peanuts. Peanut oil comes from peanuts, and peanutness is there in the peanut oil. So it has identity with peanuts. but it doesn't have the full identity with peanuts because peanuts possesses qualities that peanut oil doesn't have, for example. So in this way, the universe is also God. It has identity with God, but the identity is asymmetrical. His full presence is not manifest in nature, but it is also him. And so the Prabhu appears as himself in the form of the universe composed of the gunas. Or the way Prabhupada takes it is that, the way he's translated is that the distinction, so the jivas aren't the universe. So this is one distinction between jiva and God. Or the other distinction is that the universe comprised of the gunas bewilders the small living entities. That's how Prabhupada talks about it here in his translation. So this is the difference between Bhagavan and the jiva. Okay, a couple of other verses here in this sequence. Next verse. Nayasyasti priya kashtena priya swaparopiva eka sarvadiyam drashta katrirnam gunadoshayo. For this living entity, no one is dear, nor is anyone unfavorable. He makes no distinction between that which is his own and that which belongs to anyone else. So this is a translation on the first two lines. Nayasyasti priya kashne, na priya swaparopiva. So no one is dear, priya, and no one is undear, apriya. So Krishna says as such in Bhagavad Gita also, samahansa rabhuteshu namedushosti na priya. But then he says, Ye bhajanti tu mam bhaktya mayi te teshu chapya. But for those who do my bhajan with devotion, then mayi te teshu chapya, then they are in me and I am in them, in a devotional sense. Because earlier in the Gita, Krishna also says is that everything exists in him and he exists in everything. That when he says that earlier in the chapter 9, it's in an ontological sense. Everything exists in him, being the infinite reality without which nothing could exist whatsoever. And he exists in everything because without his presence, nothing could function. He's the Paramatma, the Antaryami that regulates everything in the universe. So that's a very ontological talk. But when Krishna says, those who do my bhajan with bhakti, then I am in them and they are in me, that means they are in me because they're attached to me. So they are in me out of attachment. Their minds are always thinking of me. And I am in them because of attachment for them. As Narayana tells the Rasmuni that the devotees are my heart and I'm the heart of the devotees. They know no one but me. I know no one but them. So this is the sense of that verse from Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna, it says here, he is God. It has no one is there, no one is not there. No, that is in an ontological sense. So he looks upon all of nature neutrally. Vice, whether you're vicious or virtuous, you get an equal eye from Bhagavan and his Paramatma feature. No one is there because of their virtue, and no one is not there because of their vice. It is basically two sides of the same coin of material absorption. Whereas if one does his bhajan, even if you're a demon, there are many examples of demons doing bhajan in the Bhagavatam, then they become dear because of their bhakti. So Krishna has some partiality. God is Bhagavat feature that's brought out by the commentaries. Anyway, swaparo apiva, or he doesn't think in terms of this is mine, this is for others, because he doesn't have any false ego. He has, we said nirahankriti, this was spoken on the jiva yesterday. He is without the ahankara. So that quality, of course, is from Bhagavan. He has no false self that would be the cause of the notion that this is mine and this is for others. Actually, everything is his, intrinsically by dint of being God. So that notion doesn't come out with God. This is his special quality. Okay, Eka Saradiyam Drashta Kartrinam Gurudusha. So Prabhupada's translations to this says, he is one without a second, Ekaha. So there's no other reality like him. If there was any other reality like him, then he couldn't be the absolute truth. Or if that reality were exactly the same as him, that amounts to him being one reality only. So Eka, one. There's no other reality like the one reality, the Advaya Gyan. ground of being. So he is one without a second. In other words, he is not affected by friends and enemies, well-wishers, or mischief mongers. So I think this is a translation of the word sarvadiyam drashta. Katrinam gunadosha. So he's not seeing the qualities or the faults of the performers of virtues and acts. He doesn't see like that. He is only an observer, a witness of the different qualities of man. So sarvadiyam drashta. He is the drashta, the witness of the sarvadiyam, the different states of being, consciousness. There's that verse from Bhagavad Gita chapter 13, upadrashta anumantacha, that I'm the seer and the permitter. He's not really participating. He's a neutral witness. Udhasinabhat. I think this word is actually used in the next verse. So this is obviously this entity that's being talked about is very different from the jiva, who's conditioned in so many ways, such as the glory of God. Next verse, nadata atmahi gunam nadosham na kriyapalam udhasina vatasina paravara drigishvara. So the Supreme Lord, Atma, the creator of cause and effect, does not accept the happiness and distress that result from fruitive actions. Okay. He is completely independent of having to accept a material body. And because he has no material body, he is always neutral. The living entities, being part and parcel of the Lord, possess his qualities in a minute quantity. Therefore, one should not be affected by limitation. So anyway, Nadhata, he does not accept the qualities and the faults that come from activity. This comment comes up at least a few times in the Gita, where the acts, generally, if you perform some action, then you have to receive the fruit of the action. Kriya in the verse, the fruit of the action you're forced to accept. So sometimes it is believed that God has created the world, and there seems to be so many good and bad things in the world, and God is responsible for that. So in the Bhagavad Gita, in a few places, Krishna wants to deny responsibility for the perceived defects in the material world, by saying that he's transcendent to it, and that what the differences that you see, it says it paravara dragishvara. So he's the Ishvara paravara. Paravara means cause and effect, or paravara means high and low. Speaking of the various distinctions of things in the material world. So God is not you can say, he's the ground of everything. So nothing can happen without him. But that a mango tree should be born that shall come up from the rain, or an avocado tree, depends on who planted the seed. Right? So he doesn't take responsibility for the high and low situations of living entities in the material world. He's like the rain. So the rain is there, it facilitates the growth of the seed. But he who has planted the seed gets to enjoy the fruit. So he does not accept blame, so to speak, for the virtues and vice for the living entities in this material world. He's beyond the kriyapalam, not kriyapalam. He's beyond fruit of activity. That is not possible in him due to his transcendence. So therefore he's described here as udhasinavat. So it is as if he is neutral, udhasinavat. It is like he's neutral. He's not completely neutral. He still glances upon the material nature and activates it, so he's not completely neutral. But he is like neutral. And it's something like the rain. That example was given. I think there's another example given of God being like this flower that just by proximity you smell it, but not because the flower is like intentionally trying to get you to smell. I forget how the analogy goes. My articulation is not on point. The idea is that God by proximity activates everything, but he's not directly involved with whatever is happening, per se. So he's described as udasinavat, because his participation is required to some degree, at least his proximity. So he's not like 100% neutral in that sense. The material world is said to be the upadi of the Paramatma. And because Krishna is without that upadi, he's called Turiya, or the fourth, the complete transcendence. But it's not the upadi of Paramatma like the upadis of the conditioned jivas. You know this word upadi, and the image is given like a crystal. When you put a red flower near a crystal, then the crystal looks red. So the redness of the crystal is called the upadi of the crystal, but actually has no relation with the actual crystal. So like that, our bodies and our psyches become our upadis, and they condition us. But God is not conditioned by the material world, but they're described as his upadis because he has some connection to that. It is his Shakti, Maya Shakti. But Krishna is beyond that. So he's called his Turiya. So he's beyond the, he's like completely disconnected, so to speak, from the material world. The verse described like this. So in any case, Udasana, he is situated as though neutral. So in other words, whatever variety you see in the material world is due to the karmas of the jivas, and not due because God is giving someone a silver spoon in his mouth and to someone else is giving, poverty. No, those different conditions are due to the jiva's karma. He does not accept that. He is udasina by asina, situated as though neutral, giving the fruits of karma. Prabhupada likes to give the example of a judge also in this udasina bhat point. There's a law, and if you break the law, the judge will give you the sentence, but he does it neutrally. He tells you broke the law, okay, this is the punishment. Oh, the law didn't serve you right, okay, here's your reward. But he himself does not really involve in anyone of people's lives in like a deeply personal way. Paravarajik Ishvara. So he is the seer of the high and low. So anyway, this is the difference between the jiva and God. So something about God is spoken. There's one comment, last comment here, and I have to stop because today I have a lot of errands to run. I'm going to be running all day. Sri Vajrayana offers this last comment here. Without surrender to the Lord, caused by the mercy of devotees, it is very difficult for persons like Triptiketu, who are overcome by grief and illusion, to cross over samsara. What more can I say? This is the meaning of this section. I thought that was a very useful comment, that this is the meaning of this section, that without grace in the form of sadhu sangha, and sadhu speaking about God and the jiva, of course, and God's glory, then it's very hard for those overwhelmed with grief to overcome that illusion. They remain situated in samsara. Whereas those who get the sadhu sangha, they come out. So remember, this whole story is rooted in Parashara's question, how a demon like Vitrasura can have such great bhakti. And so from that comment that we just read and from the passage, we are to understand the answer to the question is because he got sadhu sangha. And sadhu sangha was able to affect the turning of awareness toward reality, which is a point that we've talked about many times so far. So just reiterating that this is the answer to that particular question, and that this is a point of this particular section. Now, Narada Muni will hear that Triptiketu is pacified. I guess these words are super effective. He's pacified, and then Narada Muni will teach him a mantra. He will perform worship of Bhagavan, and then he will see Sankarsana, and Sankarsana will give instructions to him as well. So that's what's coming up for the chapter. We're going to pause there and see if anyone wants to say anything. I don't see anything in the chat box. So if anyone wants to make any comment or question before I close out, we open it now.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu.
Hari Bolo.
Yeah, just a quick comment. I mean, you might have even mentioned it yourself, but when you're talking about the whole hierarchy, I immediately thought of the Sri Ishopanishad.
Yes, a great verse, perfect verse. Yeah. Om Purnam Adaha Purnam Idam. Perfect meditation for that concept. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a good one.
Oh, actually, can you tell me again? Remember, you had asked us for this famous verse. You couldn't remember it, so you had to look it up. But
Yes,
I
it's 11,
wish,
14, 26.
okay, thank you.
It's a great verse. No one can, we can't, I like that verse because the responsibility of becoming Krishna conscious is really in the hands of the individual from that verse. How much bhakti you do is how much bhakti you get. Yata, yata, tata, tata. To this degree, then to that degree. Okay, that's why I like that particular verse. A lot of devotees, we do the bare minimum, and they're like, I'm not feeling inspired. I'm like, yeah, no kidding. I'm not feeling inspired either, but I don't ask why I'm not feeling inspired. I already know that I don't do that much bhakti, so how inspired I'm supposed to feel if I'm preoccupied with dead matter all the time. Okay, Athena wants to say something.
Hare Krishna.
Hello.
I have two questions. So the first one, I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. You had just talked about Paramama today, and basically how Paramama is a neutral kind of witnesser, observer. And we also know that Paramama is the source of all knowledge, forgetfulness, and intelligence. So I'm just curious, do you, would you then say that our intuition is synonymous with Paramatma guiding us?
What do you mean by intuition?
Well, I mean, I'm just always trying to, I don't say call it in like new agey kind of terms, but it's that like internal knowing and that like internal voice. And so sometimes I would say, yeah, that's Paramatma guiding you for people who can't, who don't believe like an external God and maybe more the universe. And they're like, well, I trust my intuition. And I always say, well, God's guiding everyone. And then of course he's giving intelligence. So, if it's your intuition talking, I'm just curious, like, is it something different or would it actually be synonymous with like, yeah, Paramatma is giving guidance. And then when he does, like, it's this internal knowing, like you feel it in your butt, I'm curious your take on that.
There's a verse in the Upanishads that God guides to heaven those he wants to go to heaven, and he guides to hell those he wants to go to hell. So I remember when I first encountered this Upanishadic statement, I think I first encountered it in Baladevi Vibhushan's commentary on Gita. Forget which verse though. I was like, wait, what? And anyway, as I recall, the import of the verse is that according to the karmic destinies of the jivas, it is Paramatma who is ultimately the giver of the fruit of those destinies. So in that sense, those he wants to go to heaven, that means those who have, karmic inheritance like that, then they go to heaven. And those who have karmic reactions to endure, then they go to hell. So that is also can be said to be the guidance of Paramatma. In that sense, everyone is being guided. And the deeper sense of like a intuition that's really the voice of God, if that's seemingly like the sense of the word intuition there, the voice of God. Well, to that Krishna says, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. That for those who are constantly doing my bhajan with priti, satata yuktanam. So first of all, he says Tesham. So of them means like of a class of people, not everyone. Tesham of them. Of course, in context of the verse of Gita also, he's speaking about the Buddha Samanvita. Those who are Buddha Bhava Samanvita, those people who are endowed with Bhava and the enlightenment of Bhava. Buddha Bhava Samanvita. So Prabhupada takes that as about Bhakta basically. And they're always engaged in like hearing and chanting with each other, Chitta Makata Prana Buddha Yanta Parasmaran, deriving great satisfaction and bliss from doing so. The meditation of them, Satatan Yukta Nam, constantly, in communion with me by their devotion. Basically, Bhajatam Priti Purvakam, and engage in Priti Bhajan, the worship with love. Then Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, that I give them, the intelligent, the Buddhi Yoga by which they can come to me. So I guess I have a kind of old school ISKCON, sense that the voice of God is really heard by those who are like doing some deep communion work. I wouldn't deny that for people outside of bhakti tradition or whatever, but just as a general standard, you have to be kind of like a deep person and really doing communion work, and then you can hear the voice of God. You have to kind of bring the vrittis to silence. That is the whole idea of Yoga Sutra. Otherwise, there's so many competing voices in the psyche from the samskaras of our past. They're like ghosts, practically, the ghosts of our past. We're hunted by the ghosts of our past. Their voices hunt our psyche on a daily basis. And so distinguishing the voice of God, which can be very small in a sense, from those other voices, may not be easy for those who have yet to still their inner life. And the whole idea of that, still the inner life, and then there can be the self-disclosure of your own self and the self-disclosure of God in that stilled sanctuary, so to speak. So I wouldn't be so confident for persons who have yet to, still their inner life in that way, that they really are able to discern the voice of God from the ghosts of their past, so to speak. But if it is possible, it's possible for these sorts of people who have done that work, and it can be guided towards the greater journey. Of course, there's always a sense that things happen to us when we're even neophyte, and those things kind of are bringing us closer to God. So sometimes a contemplative will think like that if this didn't happen, if that didn't happen, then I wouldn't have been in this place. But that's coming from, as they say, hindsight is always 20/20. Once you're sitting in the grace of God due to the work of communion that you're doing, then everything becomes grace. All your experiences becomes grace only and nothing else. And so he then reframes all his experiences in terms of grace because of that higher awareness that he's now attained. So I can't say I don't like denying people their experiences. So I would never say like, no, that's not the voice of God. But I would say that as far as I hear from Gita and understand it, my sense is like this. We're all being guided by God in a certain sense because of our karmic destinies, which he is finally the giver of. But in the deeper sense of getting guidance from the inner voice, then one has to be a little bit of done the work of stilling the inner world. And for those who have yet to do so, for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, that's why we say that the spiritual master, Acharya Chaitya Vapusha Swagatam Vyaknati. Buddha was saying, even if I had a lifetime of Lord Brahma, I will not be able to repay you for the great kindness you have come to me by appearing as the Chaitya Guru in the heart and as the Acharya Vapu, the form of the Guru without, to instruct me when I couldn't hear that voice inside. So that's a general take, and that's the same.
Thank you. If I could say a different way, then they would say everyone has an intuition, and it's like that, like internal knowing, or like if something just like doesn't feel right. And even Simon Haas talks about it in The Dark Night of the Soul, where I don't know if you read the book, but he's even like he gets caught up in this like scary situation where he could have like been killed, and he just like knew, and he says it's like Krishna just like get out of there. But so I'm just curious, when they're like a situation, you're like, this something just like doesn't feel right. You're saying hypothetically that could just be based on our past samskaras.
Yeah, definitely. Why not? Yeah.
And then if people are like, okay, I'm just like tapping in and saying like how, so is there also, we don't really talk about this much, where the self is also guiding, like where someone could say, well, my internal knowing could actually just be not God, but like me, like what do I really want, and like my desire. So it actually could just be the jiva kind of talking in one sense, like the soul's like your own desires or something like that. We don't
it's just a samskara. That's what I think generally. And I think for special persons who are intent on spiritual, beatitude, then it can mean something more, and because of their eagerness and because of the reciprocity of God with such an eager individual. Otherwise, generally, there's some scar on me.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then my second, well, actually, I want to check if I had a second question that's separate. I mean, related but separate. I don't know if Mother Gail and others had questions around.
Okay, we'll take Sahara's question because I do need to skedaddle today. I'm sorry. I would normally I at least go to 9:30, but I'm a little pressed for time today. I had a couple of errands before 10 o'clock. Sahara, you want to go?
Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I was wondering, what's the flow of the Angara of this, this passage? First, we heard the example, yesterday, and then now we're hearing in this philosophy. Where are we heading to?
Don't know. So in the last chapter, Angita Muni has spoken basically some gyan, and Narada Muni gave mantra. He gave the Upanishad in the form of a mantra. But the lamentation was still, it must have been seen on Chitraketu's face that the lamentation was still lingering. So Narada Muni wanted to give further statement, some more statements. So he spoke through the voice of the jiva. And he's speaking, what is this attachment to this sambandha that you have? This sambandha is itself not even authentic. So it's more gyan actually in that sense. And there's some discussion about God. And apparently after Narada Muni speaks, we'll hear the verses, Chitraketu becomes pacified. And then he gives him the mantra. We'll hear the mantra that is given for worship of Sankarsana. And then he attains Sankarsana. So basically the flow of the passage is, where we're at now is removing the lamentation of Chitraketu. That's what's happening. And they're doing the work of removing it. So that's just a part of the story that we're hearing, the removal of the lamentation of Chitraketu. And the way that sadhus remove lamentation is by speaking about what is true. Mm-hmm. That's why we kept quoting the verse, Nasato vidite bhavo, not bhavo vidite. I kept quoting that verse because what is sat, what is true, has no absence of being. And what is not true has no true being. And so from different angles, that reality is taken up in the Bhagavatam. And so they're speaking what is true to Chitraketu to remove his lamentation, which is due to absorption in the untrue or the not ultimately true. So that's just the flow of the passage. And then he gets pacified. Then, okay, take this mantra. Then he will do bhajan. And then he will see Sankarsana.
Okay, thank you. I have a question for tomorrow. Maybe you can answer, because I know you're pressed for time. That, would you recommend sadhus also, or would you speak like in the same way as Narada Muni and Anga Rishi are speaking to somebody's loss?
Yeah, what about that?
Would you recommend speaking in the same manner?
So there's so many things that we don't get when we're hearing the Bhagavatam necessarily. We don't get tone. We don't get we don't know exactly the influence of the Shakti. I mean, we assume it with Narada Muni and Anga Rishi that they have great power. And so there are a lot of other factors that go to be able to communicate. Communication is not just the words that comes out of the mouth. That is like kind of the last part of the process of communication. There's the first and most important part is being a conduit of God's grace or God's light. That is why we do Mangal Charan. The whole purpose of doing Mangal Charan in the beginning of a class or in the beginning of any undertaking is that I can remove the self-asserting ego from the formula so that I may be able to receive the light of the absolute and then be a conduit of that light to others. So to the degree we are holding that light, where is that verse? Tirtha, Bhutani Tirtani, Swa Antastena Gadabrita. This is Yudhishthira Maharaj to Vidura, that you're a walking pilgrimage place because Swa Antastena Gadabrita, you're holding in your heart God. So that, like that cringy language that my mom likes to use, that I like it now. I mean, I like the imagery of it now, even though it still feels cringy to me. The anchoring the light, oh my God, my mom always says that. It's like, oh, so new agey. But that's what it is, actually. You're anchoring the light of the absolute in this world. That's part of the communication process. The actual feeling of compassion for the living entity and not just trying to use some words as a cudgel to, chastise. There's so many other factors. So we don't necessarily get all the elements that go into communicating a message like this in this particular manner in a way that it removes the lamentation of Chitraketu. But it can be assumed. I definitely recommend that this is the way to go when dealing with lamentation of others, but it requires other factors to make it. Just recently, this last week, I'm telling you, I should become a professional confessor. That I told you also, because I get so many devotees reaching out to me, like, can I talk to you about something? Can I confess this and another? Like literally this last week, like 4 or 5 devotees reached out to me from all over the world, literally all over the world. Can I confide in you about something? I was just like, I'm gonna start charging for this. This is getting a little bit, I don't know what it is. So one devotee, he was reaching out to me. He had a breakup with his girlfriend. I guess he wanted to maybe marry her. I don't know. So he had one breakup with a friend of mine, and national depression helped mine. And he was, right when he said, "Prabhu, can I call you?" So he called me, and immediately he was on the verge of tears. As soon as he opened his mouth, he started, was about to cry. And then I spoke about, Atmatetta. But there were so many other factors that went into that, like this particular devotee has a lot of confidence in me, a lot of young boy. He has a lot of attachment to me. We've been friends for a few years now. And so it's like already a trust is there. And I also have like genuine affection for him. So that he was also confident of. And there are a few other factors there, but these factors are very strong. So then when I just spoke straightforward, like, phew, this is the nature of material, sharing. And I just started sharing various slokas from Bhagavatam. I have my own way of sharing verses. It's not that didactic, even though it's kind of one way speaking. It's like very participatory because I'm like telling jokes and isn't it? And like getting them to participate in the whole experience. So by the end of the phone call, he was just like laughing and he was like, yeah, this is like this. But I just literally just share Bhagavatam verses, speaking about the nature of material relationships. And that's what I actually did. But there was a way that I did it that I knew I would have to do it with this particular entity. So there are so many factors that goes into that. Who knows how Narada Muni and them were communicating. But it is the way to go. At the end of the day, if people are not absorbed in reality, then the result of their absorption in our reality is they're going to continue like this only. So at some point, someone's got to let them know, like, hey, this is the nature of asat, and this is the nature of asat absorption. Otherwise, there's no solution to this. They get a little pacified in time, and then again, they do puna charita charanana. So I also suffer the same things that these people, devotees, complain about to me. I suffer the same problem. But I don't usually talk about it with anyone because I'm like, yeah, I'm absorbed in the sat. This is the result. So I was like, all right, let me get back on my job. But like, if I have to confide in someone, the way I would do it, and I don't do it a lot with a lot of people. And I do. There's a few people I can get vulnerable with, like literally 2 or 3 people. Some of my friends online here also are like that for me. But ideally, it's like, how do I improve my bhajan? Like the conversation's got to go in that direction. Because yeah, I'm absorbed in a sat. This is par for the course with that level of absorption. So the direction of the conversation has to go, how can I improve my sadhana? How can I improve my communion work with God as an actual real solution to this? Otherwise, it just keeps coming up again and again and again and again. And it sucks. Okay, I'm going to pause here. I'm going to run now because I'm behind schedule and I need to run these errands before 10 o'clock.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Y'all for tolerating and coming along, continuing to be my guardian angels and engage me in Hari Katha. All glory to you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jaya. Go Pramanandi. Hari Hari Bo. Hari Hari. Later.